All right, everyone. Hi. We are live here. I'm Dorie Clark, and I am here in Manhattan, literally in my home with my man, Rohit Bhargava. And Rohit has just come up with a new book. We have a prop. It is called Non Obvious MegaTrends. And Rohit is on his book tour. He has just launched this book. And so we are going to have a chat.
Today. Yeah, literally today. So it's perfect timing.
Mazel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rohit sent me an early copy of this. I'll flash it again. And I read it and really loved it. This is something that he has actually been doing for a number of years. For is it a decade that you've been writing the non-obvious?
Hard to believe, but yeah, it's been exactly 10 years. So the first 4 years I did this report. It was like a trend report. And every year I published 15 new trends. And then in 2015, I did it as a book. And then every year I did a new version of it. And I stupidly put the year on the cover of it, which was, probably not the best way to sell a book for longer than a year. And so this year I compiled all of those years of research. And I did something much bigger, and that's the MegaTrends book. And so it's the last one, but I'm super excited about it because it really does take like 10 years of research and puts it all into one book.
That's really fantastic. So, I mean, I'm actually curious, Rohit, and probably a lot of folks here in the audience are as well. It's it's kind of a sexy thing, right? Like future trends and spotting trends.
Futurist.
We all sort of want that. We're all interested in what's around the corner. So how did you decide to do that in the beginning? How did you get the chutzpah to be able to do it?
Yeah, I think I came at it from the point of view of a writer, and we were just kind of joking about it because we have a lot of the same books on our shelves because we're both writers. And for me, I was just trying to create something that was an entertaining blog post, and that's where it started. And I figured if it was going to be something that really captured people's attention, I would have to do something different. I'd have to talk about something with trends in a way that nobody else was talking about. And I didn't have the pressure of trying to turn it into a book. I didn't have any of that. All I was trying to do was create a kick-ass PowerPoint. And that's how it started, and the thing went viral. I mean, hundreds of thousands of views, and so I did it again the year after, and I kind of fell into it being this annual thing. And eventually it became so popular that people started saying, well, hey, are you the only one that can do this, or can you, what's the process? Show me behind the scenes, show me how it works. And that's where the book actually came from. So that's why it turned into a book.
Yeah, so this was really interesting to me, Rohit. I mean, reading this book, reading Non Obvious MegaTrends, one of the things that I thought was really cool is you actually break down the methodology of how people themselves can become trend spotters. So if anyone has aspirations of becoming a futurist, this is a book that actually gives you a kind of play-by-play sense of how to do it, of how to aggregate things and how to sort of look for the signal in the noise. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like, of how you comb through and actually figure out, what is a trend versus what is just kind of a random blip or a fad?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time gathering stories, and I am fond of describing the process as the way I collect stories is the same way most people collect frequent flyer miles, right? Like I'm capturing them now, but then I'm using them later. And that's what I try and do with all these stories. And the idea behind doing that is you see these connections over time that you wouldn't otherwise if you just kind of did it see something today and then make a connection tomorrow. So when I say I'm doing it over a longer period of time, I really do it all year. And so eventually when I come around to writing this book every year, I have 9 months worth of just captured and saved stories. And if you've seen any of the videos of what I call my haystack method, which is the process that I use for doing it, there's these time-lapse videos, and they're very entertaining because I'm literally moving paper around, right, in fast speed. And if you just Google haystack method, you'll find some of those videos, right? And the idea is I'm physically moving stuff around. And when people see that, they're kind of surprised by how much paper is involved in that process, right? And I say to them, I'm still saving stuff on my phone. I'm still using Feedly and Pocket and all these apps to save stories. But when it comes to aggregating these ideas, I kind of need to look over it physically, and I find a lot of value in doing it that way. So that's a big part of the process.
So now that you are not going to be writing these books anymore, are you still I assume it's kind of become a habit over the past decade to gather.
Well, and it's not only has it become a habit, but I actually use it now on a weekly basis because I write a weekly email, and the email newsletter is the most interesting stories of the week. And so every week I'm capturing all these stories and I'm trying to put them into a format that for all my subscribers is of value for them. And that I'm going to keep doing. So that level of input and like the way that I capture stories, you're right. Like at this point, it's a habit for me. Like, so I wouldn't stop.
So let's break it down for people who are who are interested in the process, Rohit. Like maybe you can take, I don't know if you had something today or yesterday, but like in the recent past, like what is an article that you saw just recently that captured your attention and why? Like what was it that made that thing stand out, that made you want to file it for later?
Let's see. I was on the way over, actually. I was filing stories. So I filed one on a new logo for the United Arab Emirates. Thought that was interesting that a region had a logo, and it caused me curiosity because I'm like, what was the logo before? Like, what was wrong with that, right? So I saved that one. And when I save them, by the way, like I don't read them and then save them. I save them to read later. So I actually haven't read it. I just read the headline and I saved it. There was another one about the trouble that Amazon was getting into when Bezos donated a certain amount of money to Australia, and there was a backlash. And that actually related to one of the mega trends I wrote about, which was like all about purpose and profit. And when you just throw money at something but you don't have it as part of your actual purpose, you're going to get in trouble for that because it's not, people don't see you doing that credibly, right? So I saved that story. Let's see, I'm sure there was others. Those are the ones I remember.
Those are good examples. I love that.
Yeah, and I'm always kind of looking for just like what piques my curiosity and what is. I really challenge myself when I'm writing that to give people stories they haven't heard. And so I'm generally not saving like, here's the story about the big news story that everybody's already writing about. That's not interesting to me. Like what's interesting is the unusual, the unexpected, those stories.
Yeah. So Rohit, what do we do with like so you can imagine it's a good in and of itself. Like, okay, we can sort of prepare ourselves mentally for the future if we sort of understand what the big trends are. But like, how do we, or how do you actually make use of them? Like, you've identified, some big trends, some sort of overarching trends here. I mean, I'm flipping through. We have data abundance, or we have pieces here. Let's see, attention wealth. These are kind of interesting concepts.
Yeah.
But how would like a business person actually make use of it, even if they were aware of a kind of big picture trend?
Yeah, see, I'm not a big fan of what I call trend theater, which is just the idea that, oh, isn't that like cool? And you're looking at it over there. And I really think that these should impact what we do, behavior, right? So the short answer is at the end of every trend chapter, there are 3 stealable ideas for like what to do with this trend tomorrow to use it right away, right? So I'm not going to give you just read the book, it's in the book answer, but there's a lot of actionable insight, right? The other thing that I'll say, and the example that I often give is like, if you are stuck in the wilderness, right, and you've got to like fend for yourself, in one version of the story, you're stuck in the wilderness, you got nothing, right? It's really hard. In the other version, you have a backpack that has some duct tape, it has some shelter, it has some water, it has all these other things. Now you're stuck in the wilderness, at least you'd have a chance, right? And what I'm trying to encourage people to do is like, get these ideas into your head, because that's like filling up your backpack, right? Like it's getting you ready for whatever's going to come next. Because maybe, your job's going to pivot and all of a sudden, like you got to make yourself indispensable or you're going to lose it, right? Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to launch that next thing and figure out how to get that hook that gets people to pay attention and to go viral, right? So that insight and like coming up with that stuff in the moment when you need it is based on like having that backpack be full. And that's a discipline that I think we all can use.
Yeah, that's great. So forgive me, I'm just getting over a cold. So
yeah.
Look at my little sad coughs here. So if somebody wanted Rohit to be, more well-versed on an ongoing basis, what are there a few media outlets that you think that people like everybody should be reading? Like how can we be keeping up with the knowledge that we need?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, assuming a lot of people who are watching this are in the US, I'd say number one, read media from outside the US. And no matter what country you are, like read media from outside your country is a great way to do that. The other thing that I do, and I'm a big fan of doing, and I often talk about in any of my talks, is read media properties, read magazines that are not targeted at you. So read things that are not on something you're interested in, read things that are targeted to someone who's totally unlike you, who's a different demographic than you, because you'll start to see things that you wouldn't expect, right? So I used to read for a long time when Teen Vogue was in print, I would read Teen Vogue all the time. And the reason why I would read Teen Vogue is because I see celebrities I've never heard of. I see ads for products I don't understand. I see language that's unfamiliar to me. But because I'm doing all that stuff intentionally, like I'm challenging myself to see that stuff. Because online, everything's personalized, right? So I only see the stuff I agree with. I only see the people's media that I know. I don't ever get exposed to anything else. And that's intentional because that's what the algorithm thinks I want. And even when you search, like a lot of people, I mean, everybody who kind of knows us is probably pretty savvy. So you know that like when you search for something on Google and I search for something on Google, we get different results because they're personalized. But you'd be amazed at how many people don't understand that. They think that a Google search is a Google search and what you see is what I see. And so they don't understand, like, how can somebody think what they think if they're seeing the same thing I'm seeing? And in actuality, like, that's not happening. And so I think we've got to break ourselves out of that and say, just because somebody's seeing different information, concluding different things, doesn't mean they're a complete moron. It means that maybe I need to look at like where that information is coming from and choose to subscribe to it myself. Like I'm subscribed to the email campaigns for both political parties, and I get emails from both parties all the time. Which leading up to the election, it's like getting emails all the time, right? But I choose to do that because I want to see what the messages are from everybody.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, even just as another example, I was over at my girlfriend's house the other night and we were looking for something to watch on Netflix, and I noticed that the sort of placard that they have advertising the shows, I had heard about this. I heard that this is the case, but they use different cards with different images for different people.
Yeah, that's right.
So on hers, it was interesting because they were advertising like a spy show, which the star of the spy show was a guy, but the placard had a woman on it because apparently Netflix thought that would make her more likely to watch it.
Yeah, and subliminally, probably did, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is science behind what they're showing us, and we don't often realize it. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So Rohit, I'm curious. I mean, many of these trends that you've identified, I mean, part of why you did this like sort of 10-year roundup of the mega trends is that they sort of morph a little bit and there's different elements of it, but they do seem to play out consistently over time. Like I noticed, speaking of gender, like gender is something over the past decade that played out in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it has.
You had emphasis, different years there was emphasis about changing masculinities or different things.
Fierce femininity or muddled masculinity were the two like opposite angles, right? So one was all about femininity and it becoming more fierce, and then on the flip side there was like all of these questions about like, well, what does it mean to be a man today, and like how do I, if I'm trying to be a good man, like what does that mean? Like how do I need to behave? What do I need to change, right? And now this year I chose to focus on what I called ungendering, which is this idea that the things that we used to decide solely based on gender, or buy solely based on gender, are not based on that anymore. And so all of these things that used to be fundamental, like if you filled out an online form, be like first name, last name, gender, like that's what they would ask you. And now that's not the way that it works anymore. Like people identify themselves as much differently, right? I get emails with the signature file saying my preferred pronouns are, whatever the preferred pronouns are. And so we've got to change the way that we orient some of the stuff that we've got, right? So it's everything from, you see like toys no longer being blue and pink, and aisles for girls and clothes not being the same, all the way through to like more than a dozen countries now have a third gender option for passports. So now you don't have to be male or female on your passport. You can be gender X, which is, up to you, right? It's something different. And so I think the more empathy and understanding we get from organizations and even governments about this, the more people will start to see that there isn't just a binary choice anymore. Like people see this as a much bigger way of identifying themselves.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, certainly there were other, elements, things around like data and privacy and things like that over a period of years seem to play themselves out. I mean, to me, it was kind of a hopeful message in some ways for business people, that it's not like you see a trend and then look, you missed it and now it's gone. Yeah. It's like it sort of iterates and plays out in different ways over a period of years, over a period of even in fact the whole decade, about sort of changing and emerging understandings of whatever that sort of long range change is.
Yeah, and if there's one kind of big message behind this idea of non-obvious thinking, it's that there are certain people who, when they see these things changing, when they see those long-held beliefs or the culture is shifting, they panic and they retreat. And there's some people who say, what's going on? Like, let me dig into that. Like, let me try and understand that. And I would love for more people to be in that second category. I would love for more people to be what I describe as a non-obvious thinker, somebody who sees that unique situation happening and says, I don't get it, but that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah, that's powerful. One sort of last thing I wanted to dig in with you, Rohit, that I thought was so interesting. You are exceptionally good at coming up with titles for, sort of identifying these trends and, finding ways of talking about them in ways that I think illuminate them or just create a little, catchy. I'm looking at one here. We have selfie confidence, which is great. We have everyday stardom. We have personality mapping. We have mainstream multiculturalism, authentic fame seekers. These are all, kind of facets of similar trends. But how did you come up with the names for these, and how did you feel comfortable kind of encapsulating such an amorphous concept?
Yeah, naming to me is branding, right? And I'm a branding guy. I mean, I spent my career in branding around people who do this for a living, right? So I think part of it is the influence of that and the influence of that background. And I think the other is just trying to find a meaningful way to describe something that makes sense to somebody right away, where they hear that and they're like, oh, shoptimization. Okay, it's shopping, it's optimization. Like, I get it. Like, I get what that means, right? And so I think that brings an idea to life. I mean, it's a little bit like cute and maybe a little, too cute, but the idea
never too cute.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, thank you. But I think the idea is like it sticks in people's heads, and later on when they start thinking about it, they're like, oh yeah, they remember. They remember the name, and I think that's really the point of any branding. And so when I think about naming, and actually I have an entire section in the book that talks about naming and how you can name stuff effectively. And so I have a couple of different techniques that I use for that. So alliteration. So like muddled masculinity, 2 M's. So it's like, rolls together, right? Or like mashups, you put different words together. So these are different techniques that you can use if you're trying to name something that you can kind of, it's not a branding book per se, but the techniques are there and you can use them.
Yeah, very transferable.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Rohit, anything else that we want to that you want to mention to our audience here before we part about your book?
Just that it's launch week this week, so if you could support the book, you can get it pretty much everywhere. And this week it's just 99 cents on Kindle, so it's certainly not going to break the bank at all.
An amazing bargain. I have read this book personally. I think it's fantastic. Non Obvious MegaTrends by my man, Rohit Bhargava. And I hope you enjoy it. I'm Dorie Clark. Rohit, if in addition to buying the book, Non Obvious MegaTrends, if people want to learn more about you, read the rest of your stuff, where should we send them online? Yeah, so nonobvious.com/megatrends. You can watch that video that I mentioned, the haystack method video, or just my personal site, rohitbhargava.com, and you can see like lots of other videos and plenty of other things. If you're going to be at South by Southwest, I'll be there doing a talk, and just me directly. So I'm pretty approachable and available, especially during launch week. Exactly. He might even come to your house. He might even do a LinkedIn Live.
House call right here. House call right here.
That's right. Full service. I'm Dorie Clark. You can find out more about my stuff at dorieclark.com. And we're glad to have you here. Bye, guys.